Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel like I'm in Alice in Wonderland after that. Every American receives the same application of the law, and it does not matter what your last name is. So I guess that means if your last name is Perry, that subpoenas apply to you as well, lawful subpoenas. Now, I appreciate the gentleman from Pennsylvania's argument that the January 6th committee was not a duly constituted committee, and in fact, he and many others made that same argument to a number of courts of law. The courts are charged with interpreting our laws and whether a committee is a duly constituted committee and whether a subpoena is a duly constituted subpoena. And even though my friend from Pennsylvania may not like the fact that a neutral judge, multiple judges in fact, didn't agree with him, it still remains the law of the land, not what Mr. Perry says, not how I would interpret the January 6th committee, but how every single court of law interpreted it and said it was a validly constituted committee, and every single subpoena issued by that committee was a duly authorized lawful subpoena, no different than the subpoena to Hunter Biden.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
No, unfortunately, sir, you did not yield to me, so I will not yield to you. The fact of the matter is that subpoenas should apply equally. And for my colleagues to actually claim that we on this side of the aisle are hypocritical because we will not vote to hold someone who has made every effort to comply in every way other than the specific means of providing the evidence is somehow should be held in contempt when 3 members of this committee refuse to comply in any way, shape, or form with a court-determined lawful subpoena is beyond me. Now, I find it interesting that my friend from Pennsylvania also chastises us for just supporting our guy. And I wonder how he would define supporting our guy. Would he define supporting our guy as trying to instigate a coup at the Department of Justice to install a lackey and remove the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General so that he could keep his guy in office even though he lost? Is that just supporting our guy? Because that's what Mr. Perry did. The reality is that we are here because, plain and simple, 2 reasons: retribution for Donald Trump and the fact that the Republicans have no evidence. And you will hear them talk about evidence. You will hear them say, we have so much evidence, we have so much evidence. And we're going to get into some of these details as we go forward. But the reality is that you have been moving the goalposts the entire time because you cannot make any connection, notwithstanding all of your false statements, to the president. So instead, let's subpoena Hunter Biden. Because what we will expect is that he won't testify, or that he'll take the Fifth Amendment because he's under criminal indictment. And then we get to say, aha, all of our specious allegations must be true, because if they weren't, he would come here and testify. Well, he called your bluff, and now you're scrambling.
Will the gentleman yield to a question?
No, I will not. And now you're scrambling.
You sure?
And now you are desperate to find anything to divert attention away from your abject lack of evidence connecting President Biden to any business venture of Hunter Biden's, to any wrongdoing. So we're going to hold us here on a contempt hearing because you don't want to see him testify in public. You just want to be able to filter his testimony in closed-door testimony as you have been doing this entire Congress.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will yield to my ranking member. Thank you.
Thank you. The District Court for the District of Columbia, Judge Kelly, obliterated the argument that
Time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of taking the bait, which is all this is, it's laying a little bait and might be just too attractive for me, so I got to get in on it, just a little bit. I'm intrigued by the assertions of my colleagues who claim that the Hunter Biden violation of the subpoena scenario is the same as issuing subpoenas to 4 members of Congress. I'm intrigued by that. I really am. It's interesting. Had the illegitimate J6 group decided to enforce its dubious subpoena against me, my counsel was prepared to argue that service of that subpoena was insufficient, and so asserted to counsel for the J6 committee. Had the illegitimate J6 gaggle sought to enforce its subpoenas, my counsel, and I believe the counsel of each member of Congress who had been subpoenaed, ostensibly subpoenaed, putatively subpoenaed, would also have asserted successfully a privilege under the Constitution of the United States. Those questions never arose formally because the now defunct J6 committee, which has no authority anymore because it passed with the closing of the last session of Congress. I think that cabal surely understood that its tenuous claims, how tenuous its claims were, and chose not to try and enforce its questionable subpoenas. And why do I say that? I say it because in reporting to Reuters, the committee's own chairman, Benny Thompson, said this, quote, "There are some questions of whether we have the authority to compel testimony from Republican colleagues." He knew you didn't have that authority, but yet you still tried to assert it. Now, what's the distinction? Well, Hunter Biden has no claim to insufficiency of service of process. Why do we know? Because he stood on the lawn of the Senate the same day that he was supposed to be here and asserted publicly, hey, I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I'm supposed to be giving a deposition, but I won't do it. I won't do it. Secondly, Hunter Biden has claimed no privilege against testifying before this committee or the Judiciary Committee pursuant to the subpoena, except for the privilege that he has claimed throughout his life. And as the LA Times said about Hunter Biden, quote, "Biden is still on the nepotism gravy train," close quote. As the Daily Mail reported, quote, "Hunter admits he got $50,000 a month job on the board of Ukrainian gas company Burisma because of his family name," close quote. And it goes on and on. Again, the LA Times describes Hunter Biden as a, quote, "child of privilege," close quote. That's the only privilege Hunter Biden has ever asserted. He asserts that not that he should be exempt from testifying because there is some constitutional proscription that even the chairman of this committee would agree to, as Benny Thompson agreed to on the J6 committee's issuance of subpoenas to members of Congress. No, he doesn't assert that kind of privilege. He asserts only the privilege that he does not need to come and testify before the United States Congress, who has issued him a subpoena. His attorneys acknowledge that subpoena, and he personally has acknowledged that subpoena for the simple reason that he is a Biden. So, where are we? Merrick Garland has authorized pursuing Republicans for contempt of Congress. He must also authorize prosecution of Hunter Biden. Failure to do so on the part of the Attorney General will show his contempt for Congress as well. But it will show even greater contempt for the American people who now recognize the weaponization of the federal government and the two-tier system promulgated by Democrats. Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Thompson's, to former Chairman Thompson's questioning of his own authority to actually issue subpoenas to members of Congress, Chairman Jordan requested legal analysis and authorities. But Chairman Thompson never responded. That committee could have pursued contempt if they thought there was valid subpoenas issued and a contemptible, warranted contempt citation. They chose not to. Their authority expired, and ours is not expired. We should issue contempt. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3 names: Jordan, Perry, and Biggs. Not a law firm. 3 members of this body who defied a legitimately issued subpoena upheld by courts of law. I think it's really important to remember that when the word hypocrisy is thrown around by some of our friends on the other side of the aisle. The other thing I think that's really important, before I yield to the ranking member, Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, knows that if he appeared in camera, in secret, to be deposed, Republicans would cherry pick what he said and leak it. He preferred sunshine. He preferred to come here out in the open and testify before the entire American public, this body, and everyone watching, and take his chances with public testimony that could not be used to his detriment by cherry picking and distortion. That is and ought to be the right of an American citizen. I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Conley. I wanted to introduce for the record, Mr. Chairman, United States District Court for the District of Columbia opinion in RNC versus Nancy Pelosi, rendered by Judge Tim Kelly, rejecting, obliterating, and demolishing every argument that we heard from Mr. Perry and Mr. Biggs. Their whole argument seems to be that Republicans were entitled to blow off subpoenas of the United States Congress that came from the January 6th committee because they didn't like the committee, they didn't think it was legitimate, they thought it was not validly authorized. The courts roundly and uniformly rejected those arguments. So now they purport to render the law for themselves. If they don't want to comply with the subpoena, they won't, and yet they would now hold other witnesses like Hunter Biden to a standard they won't accept for themselves. That's a remarkable thing. I started off this hearing, Mr. Chairman, by saying we believe that everybody should respond in good faith to the subpoenas of the United States Congress. Now, Mr. Biden asserts that he responded in good faith to what you repeatedly publicly asked him to do. And he's at least got an arguable, colorable claim that that's true. All the case law I've been able to read, Mr. Chairman, suggests that the committee is supposed to engage in good faith negotiation with witnesses, which is precisely what the January 6th committee did. The dates don't always work out. The times don't always work out. Some people want to assert a privilege. Some people don't. There are certain questions that are agreed to or not. So there are negotiations. But as I read at the beginning of this
hearing—
Will
the gentleman take a question?
But I will as soon as I get to that.
Excuse me, it's my time.
Oh.
Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. Why is the committee not engaged in that negotiation with Hunter Biden? I just don't understand that. I mean, he's a guy who appears to be 99% willing to do what you even asked him to do in the written subpoena, but he's given 100% good faith compliance with what you repeatedly publicly challenged him to do. So I don't understand why you won't meet with them and work it out, which is what every court in the land has said. The courts don't want to be involved in all this stuff, especially when you've got a guy like him who's overwhelmingly complying with what you're asking for, unlike all of these colleagues on the other side of the aisle who unfortunately 100% defied the subpoenas of the United States Congress, which is what they did. And I don't think those people should be able to vote on any subpoena relating to any witness in this committee until they render cooperation with the January 6th committee and come forth and tell us what they know. Now, there's another point that I need to make, and I want to thank Mr. Conley for his indulgence here. Our good friend, the gentlelady from Georgia, referred to the murder of Ashley Babbitt. Well, the Department of Justice, the United States Attorney, and the U.S. Capitol Police Inspector General all rejected the idea that there was any
Point
murder.
of order,
There was
Mr. Chairman. Or inquiry.
There's no such thing.
There's never been a court hearing.
Mr. Chairman, we agreed.
Michael Byrd was
hold
never
on.
charged.
Reclaiming order here. The time is Mr. Conley's. I yield back to Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But I will submit for the record a document entitled Department of Justice Closes Investigation into the Death of Ashley Babbitt, United States Capitol Police. Document USCP completes internal investigation into the January 6th officer-involved shooting. I think it was a scandal. It was a tragedy that people died because Donald Trump put them at risk, as many of the former insurrectionists are now willing to say publicly, that he said you got to go and you got to fight and fight like hell, or you will not have
time's expired, Mr. Conley's time's expired.
I'm sorry
Mr. Conley's time is
lives.
expired. Mr. Conley's time is expired. Order, order.
I was trying to reclaim the time the gentlelady stole from me.
Oh, we stopped the clock. I watched it. I'm paying close attention. I do feel compelled to respond to this. We have engaged in good faith negotiations. We've offered every witness a narrow scope of topics, documents in advance. They can choose the date. Hunter Biden's lawyer has not engaged with the committee regarding Hunter Biden. Chair now recognizes Mr.
Did you
Waltz,
respond to their
our
letters
newest
to
member,
offer to
for 5
cooperate,
minutes.
sir? Mr. Chairman, did you respond to the lawyer's offer to cooperate with the committee and meet with the committee?
Do what? Yeah, Chair recognizes Mr. Waltz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an incredible first hearing with this committee.
Welcome to the Oversight Committee.
It was, but I mean, this was entirely predictable. I think what we were going to hear and see today. We saw that Hunter came and staged a PR stunt with my friend from Florida, Mr. Moskowitz. That was clearly organized and recognized. But what I'm hearing from the ranking member and his colleagues that claim that transcripts are subject to, quote, partisan and twisted leaks and distortions is incredibly rich. Let's talk about calling the kettle black first. The country suffered through an entire impeachment proceeding of a president of the United States because of a false dossier in a SCIF, a compartmented facility where every hearing and every transcript started with, this is an unclassified proceeding, then to have it selectively leaked and lied to the American people, to the great damage to this nation, but then bring it to this committee because I'm new. I watched yesterday as committee Democrats continued to spin false narratives, several of which went out just yesterday as interviews were ongoing with Hunter Biden's art dealer, which is rich in and of itself, that Congressman Golden on the other side of the aisle went to the press during the interviews and spun a narrative while it was going on, but he conveniently omitted that 70% of the art buyers were Biden donors. So we can go down the line and talk about
false,
spin.
Sir. That's not the facts.
But the other thing that we're hearing today, well, member so-and-so, Congressman so-and-so, Congressman Jordan, they didn't comply with their subpoenas. But let's have a quick lesson on the Constitution. Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution, the Speech and Debate Clause, essentially protects all of us from abiding by each other's subpoenas. Otherwise, this body would do nothing but subpoena each other. So I would encourage my colleagues to look up Article 1, Section 6 and look at the case law of the Speech and Debate Clause and why my colleagues rightfully did not abide by that subpoenas. But let's talk about precedent for a moment of a president's son abiding by lawful subpoenas of the Congress. Donald Trump Jr. came before this body. He came before the House Intelligence Committee. He came before the House Judiciary Committee. He came before the Senate Intelligence Committee twice. He came before the so-called Jan 6 Committee, all behind closed doors where lawyers can sit down, both sides of the aisle, and have a conversation, go through documents, all under oath, which is the precedent for any committee. Don Jr. came before committees and came before this body 5 times behind closed doors. What is Hunter Biden afraid of? What won't he do? And Ranking Member Raskin, you're going to reap what you sow, my friend. I mean, you insisted on depositions for those who appeared before the Jan 6 committee when Steve Bannon agreed to testify publicly. You argued, sir, that he should have to sit for a closed-door interview, just like every other witness. Quote, the way we have treated every single witness is the same. They come in behind closed doors. They talk to the committee there. You said on an interview in front of CBS in 2022, but now that Republicans are doing the same process, following House rules, doing the investigating, somehow Hunter Biden, because he's a Biden, should be held to a different standard. At the end of the day, we had a government official and the President of the United States, a vice president, set up 30 shell companies. Why? What product did those companies sell? Nothing. Vice President Biden was charged with 2 countries in his portfolio, China and Ukraine. While the vice president, his son, traveled on official business on Air Force Two and received massive monetary contributions afterwards. We have laws in place, colleagues, that prevent foreign powers from influencing government officials. Were policies changed as a result of the dinners, the calls, the text messages that we know President Biden engaged in through his son? We have a duty to get to the bottom of it. We will reference this contempt, and we will see if the Attorney General will uphold a fair standard of the law.
The time's up, Mr. Chairman.
And prosecute Hunter Biden.
Time's
Thank you, Mr.
expired.
Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Crockett for 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. So we love the Constitution today, and we also want to talk about foreign money coming in. Have y'all seen the report that was just produced where this chairman decided that he was going to block this committee from receiving additional information about y'all's guy, Trump, and all the money that he took? From what we did receive, we know that Trump got almost $6 million that we can account for, and we know that there's more there. From China specifically, we found almost $8 million total that he accepted from foreign governments while he was serving as the president of these United States. But we're concerned about the president's son who has not been involved in his administration. I just want to run it back, though, to the very beginning, because this is something that I just can't get over. I can't get over the gentle lady from South Carolina talking about white privilege. It was a spit in the face, at least of mine as a black woman, for you to talk about what white privilege looks like, especially from that side of the aisle. And let me quote your now ousted speaker and what he had to say about the Republican Party and y'all's lack of diversity. When you look at the Democrats, they actually look like America. When I look at my party, we look like the most restrictive country club in America. So let me tell you something. Y'all don't know what white privilege looks like, but I'm gonna show you a little bit of something. You see, you want to talk about a 2-tier justice system, and this is the only time that y'all have ever referenced it, when this country has a history when it comes to black and brown folk of having 2 separate sets of rules. And right now what you want to do is have 2 separate sets of rules because Mr. Moskowitz offered y'all a fair situation. He said he would vote for Hunter to be held in contempt if y'all voted to hold all, even if you remove all of the members of Congress. There's still other people that y'all haven't decided that y'all have excuses for, but y'all don't want to hold them in contempt. But for some reason, it makes sense to hold Hunter Biden in contempt, who has tried to comply. And let me tell you why nobody wants to talk to y'all behind closed doors, because y'all lie. That's just the bottom line. You have done it thus far in this investigation. You have done it this far as it relates to this committee. In every single hearing, y'all spin, spin, spin. I don't know how y'all are still standing right now, because you should be quite dizzy from all the spinning that you're constantly doing when it comes to spinning the truth. You talk about free and fair elections, but you back a guy who we know tried to steal the election. And this isn't about what Democrats have to say. Let me remind you, for those of you that don't know how the justice system works, it's not a matter of the president went in and indicted Trump, but we are are talking about grand juries. Grand juries are comprised of American citizens, and the people that have entered pleas of guilty that will be flipping on your leader in a minute, they are Republicans. I do want to point that out. And half of them were Republicans that were handpicked by Donald Trump himself. So, to be clear, whatever happens to your little leader, it's going to be because of the actions that he took. So you can talk all you want to about how January 6th was nonsense, but all of y'all were running at that time. Y'all were grabbing y'all's gas masks, and y'all were running to your offices because you didn't know if they were coming to kill you. You should have cared that somebody was there to protect you, but instead you want to play games because you found out that it was your leader that decided that he wanted to propagate an insurrection on our country. So don't tell me that you care about the Constitution, because you don't. All you care about is Trump getting reelected, and I'll yield the last of my time to my leader.
Thank you very much, Ms. Crockett, for your eloquent and powerful and irrefutable remarks. I'd like to just add a couple of points to what you've said. On January 6th, Senator Ted Cruz described it as terrorism. They later came to attack him during their revisionist, Orwellian, Stalinist attempt to rewrite history. Unfortunately for them, we know that there were 147 or 48 of our officers who were wounded, bloodied, and hospitalized by the rabid mob that beset the Capitol that day. We know that Kevin McCarthy, one of their deposed leaders over on their side, called Donald Trump from his office to complain about how his people were storming the Capitol and putting people's lives in danger. And Donald Trump said, no, those aren't my people, those are Antifa. And McCarthy corrected him and said, no, those are your people, Mr. President. To which Donald Trump said, well, maybe they just care a little bit more about who won the election than you did, Kevin McCarthy. You guys have got to deal with reality here. By the way, the speech and debate clause stands for the exact opposite principle who our distinguished new member just spoke about a moment ago. It says that members of Congress cannot be questioned anywhere else other than Congress. So he should read the speech or debate clause aloud.
Let him finish his sentence there. Now, Chair recognizes Mr. Burchett from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.